My hot take is I think within 5 years, we're definitely going to see an obvious transition away from employment, like period. Like the number of employees is going to be dramatically dropping. That relationship just is going to go away. AI is going to make it so easy. There's going to reach a tipping point where the existing companies are like, why would I hire someone? And I mean, I think it's obviously a good thing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One Night in Product Hot Takes Edition, where I speak to one person about one thing, get straight to the point and find out what's on their mind. Now, if you've got something on your mind, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com/hot, where you can find a time, grab a slot, we can have a chat and we can share your opinions with the world. But in any case, do remember to head over to onenightinproduct.com, where you can find all my past episodes, as well as make sure to find the podcast in your favourite podcast app or subscribe on YouTube to make sure you never miss another episode again. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get straight to Matt Maier's hot take. All right, so in front of me, I see kind of a yellowy beige background with a lovely map of lots of places in the world that I haven't been, a fantastic looking microphone, a couple of books, and a man with some glasses and a bit of a beard going on there, something that I could never grow. But I'm going to throw over to you and stop talking about myself and ask you who you are, where you're based, what it is you do, and most importantly, what your hot take is.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's great to meet you. I've heard plenty of the podcasts and whatnot and love the conversations. My name is Matt Maier, and I'm in Irvine, California, which is beautiful because we're edging out of summer right now. And I'm doing product marketing over a high level at the moment. But, in the past, I've been Air Force and I've developed products in aerospace, healthcare, done some consulting with startups and small businesses and such. And so my hot take, this is partly like inspired by some of the other hot takes you've had, is I think within 5 years, we're definitely going to see an obvious transition away from employment, like period. Like the number of employees is going to be dramatically dropping. That relationship just is going to go away. For the most part, there'll be a few, but it's going to go away. And the rationale for that, right, is that AI is going to make it so easy to do all of the high friction, tedious, long tail stuff that people who want to be entrepreneurial, want to run their own business activity are going to be able to all of a sudden. There's none of this like, I don't know how to do accounting. I don't know how to do taxes. I don't know how to set up my website. I don't know. Right. It takes too much time. And they're going to want to do it. They're going to jump in. And there's going to reach a tipping point where the existing companies are like, why would I hire someone? Like, it's so easy to do a contractor. It's going to be so easy to handle all the legal boilerplate, like all of the whatever you want to handle, to have somebody do some work for you, teach them what's going on, get them up to speed, oversee them, and then end the relationship once it's done or whatever, do fractional work that you're just not going to hire employees over time. It's just going to be, business to business, basically. Maybe a tiny business, doing business as each individual will have their own business entity.
So we're talking here about kind of an agent first workforce where everything is, or a lot of things are able to be managed by autonomous AI agents that can go out and do the things. Is that really what we're talking about? And I guess if it is, do we think that's a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think visually, I kind of think of it as kind of like soap and water, right? Like, how cells and soap and so on, like you have with the phospholipid bilayer, right? So that's a phospholipid. Like, it makes oil and water mix, you emulsify something. So AI is just going to be wrapped around people, right? So all the stuff that you don't want to deal with or, understanding or actually executing will gradually automate it. And so you'll just have this layer of AI around you, and it'll take care of most of the stuff in between, right? So everything will get slipperier. That'll be the thing. It'll just be easier. It'll be easier to find people to work with. It'll be easier to work with them, but easier to move on to something else afterwards, slipperier, faster. And I mean, I think it's obviously a good thing. Now, change can be scary and change can be painful. I mean, a bunch of people who made a living, doing buggy whips, of course, got a little bit upset when there were fewer buggies to whip. But then when they did other things, better things. And the cool thing is going to be, this is just automation. AI isn't like magic. It's just more automation. It's like automated attention. So it's going to take over the jobs that we hate. We don't want to do most of the jobs we do. We do a bunch of jobs where humans have to act like robots. You have to show up at the exact same time, do the same thing over and over again, do it to the exact same quality standard. Don't take a sick day. Don't sneeze. Like, don't turn away from the computer, whatever. Like, no one wants to do those jobs.
Return to office these days.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not being driven by employment or anything. That's being driven by like real estate prices and stuff.
So what we're saying is that there's a good side to this in the sense that we're going to be able to finally put to bed all of these return to office mandates because there's not going to be many people to go back to the office. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit of silver lining to the cloud.
Oh yeah, I mean, change can be painful sometimes, but like the return to work stuff is actually the first part of it. It's in disguise because within the next 5 years, it's not, all the disguises are going to finish and they'll have to do non-disguised activities. Like return to work is to get people to quit. Like return to the office is not because they want you in the office. It's because they want you out of the company. Like return to the office is to get you to quit. You don't want to, you've been out of the office a long time. There's no reason to come back. You don't want to come back. Because if you do come back to the office, and that you can read about like Amazon doing this, people from the inside and stuff. Like, then they start like shifting you to projects you don't want to work on, taking work away from you, like no promotions and whatnot. It just gets you to quit because employment is going away. Right? That's the thing. It's like this is the very beginning signs of anything that results in less employment is part of a sign of this. Each thing is going to kind of have its S curve as it tails off, I think.
But we've talked about, for example, like the kind of the crappy jobs that probably people should never have really been doing in the first place, but we had to because we didn't have an alternative. The kind of the mundane stuff, the repetitive stuff, the stuff where you kind of want the same thing done again and again. But that's not really, it doesn't really feel like a lot of that stuff is like the AI sweet spot, because if there's one thing we could say about AI, and certainly what we've seen so far at least, is being probabilistic as it is, it's not like actually guaranteed to do the same job every time, right? So like what I've seen a lot of, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of too, and I guess from the marketing side as well, is people using this stuff to replace people. For example, copywriters, or they're now trying to do it with developers, with the Copilot stuff and Cursor, the IDE and stuff like that. They're trying to replace things that aren't necessarily mundane, repetitive stuff, like the boring grind work that you kind of mentioned before, but actually the kind of, to some extent, lower level kind of knowledge work that seems to be easy to automate because it looks perfectly credible when it comes out on a screen. But there is still this kind of sneaking suspicion in my head that it's not always going to get it right. And who do we have then to actually, do we still need to have people to look after that? Or are we going to have additional machines checking the machines? Like, how do we kind of validate that we're not mucking up?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of the exciting thing about it, is that we already run the world on humans, and humans don't get it right every time. The system has to be resilient against not just mistakes, but sabotage, right? Just like, I mean, we have, laws and ethics and training and so on to deal with, like, do your job, do it right, don't cut corners, all that already exists. So the AI just slots into that. There will be a period, there's probably like two classes of AI coming down the pipeline. One is what I like to call word calculators. Like it's just a calculator, but you put words into it and you get words out. Or maybe multimodal, right? Like picture calculator. Eventually we'll get like AGI, which will be like a person, like an artificial entity, and it'll probably have its own opinions. And I don't know, maybe it'll want to take vacations or something. So we don't want to enslave that. We'll want to treat it like a person. But the word calculators are fine. They're just tools. So that's the thing. Like it's going to take over the stuff that we didn't really want to do anyways, right? Like we didn't want to do the repetitive stuff, and it's going to let people do people things the way people want to do it. Like for example, the US education system is designed to create employees, factory workers first, but like once there was less factory work, now we just treat knowledge work like factory work, right? Because in knowledge work, there's tons of grunt repetitive work. Like the difference between a software architect and a coder is a coder just has to, like, every day has to turn a concept into code, and it has to be formatted correctly, and the syntax has to be correct, and it has to be the right version of different pieces of software. You should replace that. That's grunt work. That's basically ditch digging just on the keyboard. So that's getting replaced, right? But what do you want to build and why? I mean, the word calculator can't tell you that. That's a human thing. That's what humans want to do. We want to be like, oh man, I have this idea for a product. It'll solve this problem for my wife or whatever, right? And then the AI will go make it for you.
But some people have already been kind of espousing this idea that maybe the computers can do that as well. Like maybe the computers can kind of come up with an idea. And I was watching some sort of chats going on Twitter for some reason. I was looking back on Twitter or X because I don't hate myself enough, I guess, that I kept going back there and checking stuff out. And Roger Martin, the strategist, was complaining about people thinking that you could kind of come up with novel kind of blue ocean strategies using these LLMs and stuff like that, because of course they're kind of the product of the inputs that have been put into them. And whilst it's, inarguable that they can certainly come out with some interesting stuff, like the chances that they can actually come out with something kind of properly novel and something groundbreaking and something that other people didn't think about seems low. However, doesn't stop people, especially in this day and age when no one's got any money anymore, for trying to use tools like this, not just to automate maybe the coding work, but also to try to come up with actual architecture or marketing plans or, again, blue ocean strategies. Do you think that anyone in the near future is going to be bold enough to actually try and run their whole company off one of these things? Or do you think that that's just a lot of hot air and actually it's all going to be kind of incremental stuff for the foreseeable future?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's actually what I think I'd like to kind of start like a, conversation like you do about specifically is like, how far can you leverage one human being, right? These days without another human being involved. That's sort of like solo scale. Like how much can you scale a person using new methods of automation? Because like thinking about it is an important thing, because like LLMs don't really think exactly, right? They have like latent space. So you stuff every digital copy of everything we've ever had into them, and they like map out a multi-dimensional space. And then when they come up with something new, in air quotes, what they're doing is they're drawing a vector from like where one thing is to the other thing is, and they can keep track of every intermediate spot along that vector. So they can like show you something that we could have done, but no one ever had the time to get to that spot in latent space, right? Like we just didn't have a time to draw that picture. We could have. It's strongly implied by everything else we've done. It's infinite space, and we didn't have time to like render everything in infinite space. So the cool thing is like once exploring is turned into just a energy cost, right? Not like if it's not a human cost. Like if it takes a human life to explore something, that's complicated, right? Like maybe this human is one religion and the other guy's not. Like that's a complicated thing. So when it's just energy, when it's just, turn on the solar panels and like put it into the GPU and then just explore that space, then we're going to explore a lot more than we ever could have all by ourselves. And they're going to go do that, right? It's going to be so cheap. Like the LLM, the AI agents, complex systems are going to get out ahead of us. We're going to be like, well, I'm sort of interested in maybe doing something along this line. And it's going to race ahead of you. And in 10 minutes, it's going to come back with like 5 tested, different solutions. No creativity. It doesn't like know if one is better than the other, but it'll have developed them, tested them, maybe shown it to someone else, depending on whatever your SOPs are. And it'll come back and you'll be like, oh, cool. Now I can try these 5 different apps as an example and just see which one is like, oh, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah, let's work on that one and throw the other 4 away. Whatever. It only costs like 10 cents of electricity to generate.
Well, that cost thing, though, is an interesting one, because this kind of idea of a kind of AI-powered future and the kind of post-employee world is very much predicated both on these things getting better, but also to some extent being available. And there's definitely been some commentary out there from certain thought leaders suggesting that we might be on the end of a curve here already, and that the bubble's going to burst because a combination of the amount of money it costs to train these models, the kind of lack of any kind of substantive change in the last sort of few versions, the fact that the companies like OpenAI that are running these models, they kind of need to raise more money than the history of venture capital. Almost like it's not a given that these things are actually going to exist forever. Like, do you feel concerned in any way that the kind of the party might be over sooner than it should be because of the kind of exorbitant costs of running these things and the difficulty in actually turning a profit off of it?
No, I mean, I'm only concerned about the difficulty of transitioning, right? Like some people, this is going to happen so fast that most people have no idea it's coming. It's going to be like a tsunami. Like I saw a movie about a tsunami hitting like a tourist or something. And it's like, it's real quiet. And first there's just birds flying away and you don't know anything. And then all of a sudden, giant wave washes everything away and changes everything, right? We're seeing the birds fly away right now. Like if you're paying attention, if you're on the edge, like Twitter's a good place to be on the edge of thought on this. You're seeing the birds fly away from the ocean. You're seeing the tide start to pull back. And if you're staring at that, you might be like, those are signs of a tsunami. Oh my God. Like, but I can't get away. I'm on, It's coming one way or the other. So there's so much more room in. Like, here's an example. So one is make things compressed, right? Cheaper, make it cheaper. One example is like the Porsche jumping spider is a microscopic little spider that eats other spiders, and it's got like 8 brain cells or something. Like it's tiny, but it's smart enough to like hunt other spiders. Like it can, lose sight of a spider and then like ambush it. And it can like tweak the web in novel patterns to get the spider to respond and like enter an ambush and stuff. And it's got 8 brain cells or something. It should not be able to plan a strategy. But it's so whatever. I don't know. Strategic planning apparently only takes 8 brain cells. If you compress it, nice.
Yeah, still people fail to do it all the time.
Yeah. We'll have them on our phones. On our, smartwatches will have a foundation model running on them, offline, whatever. You can just be compressed until it's so cheap to run. And then there's, of course, the more complexity, right? More cognitive architecture, if you want to call it that. Like the raw LLM isn't all that super great. It only does one thing. It one-shots something. But like OpenAI's, strawberry, whatever thing is basically just give it time to think. Build a little architecture, give it a loop, and give it time to go over again and fix itself. And if it makes a mistake, it can try again and explore some stuff before it comes back with an answer. Just a basic agent, And the agent architecture is like, give it tools, There's no reason for it to try to do math if it's bad at math. Give it a calculator, and it can use a calculator. So as you make it a little bit more complicated, a little more like a brain, more tools and specialized functions and more compression and so on. Another one would be like, if energy is a factor, like we don't have a limit on energy. We have a limit on regulation. The only reason we don't have unlimited energy today is that we made it illegal to build nuclear reactors. That's it. Or illegal to do space exploration, right? Like we could have solar arrays in the sky beaming down energy. We could have, small, stable nuclear power plants everywhere. Energy is not a limiting factor. It's just regulation. So also, to be honest, I think the giant investments right now are because the money didn't have anywhere else to go. There's nothing else to invest in. Like Peter Thiel, talks about how we've had a lack of solid vision of the future. Everybody with money for like the last 20 years has had a vague idea of the future. Let's invest in stuff, but in everything, because I have no idea what's a good idea. But now with AI, everyone's like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, let's build the biggest, AI engine we can. Throw the money at it. Because the money was sitting around. They didn't know what to do with it anyways.
Well, look, I mean, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But as we're seeing how it plays out, I guess the obvious question is if the kind of, to some extent, sort of employer-geddon that's coming down the highway, like what do we, I mean, so you're in product marketing, I'm in product management. There's going to be a bunch of people listening to this that maybe have different roles in and around those sorts of roles as well. What do people like us have to do to stay ahead of the curve, or to get away from the tsunami, or to be sort of floating pretty on top of the waves after the tsunami passes? Like, what can we do to future-proof ourselves, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the right question to ask, because automating attention, which is what the AI basically is going to basically expose who you are as a person at your core. Because a lot of stuff's going to just sort of be done for you, right? Like cars are going to drive themselves. Pretty soon we'll have a $10,000 robot servant that'll wash the dishes. So all this stuff of like, I don't have enough time. It's like, that's not going to be a thing. It's going to go away. Or like, I don't have time to build this PowerPoint. It's like, well, now it's already built 5 seconds, right? So everybody needs to start figuring out how to augment themselves, right? With the new tools. What does it mean to be yourself if you have like infinite college interns ready to do stuff for you? Didn't have that before. What does it mean to be yourself? How do you take advantage of that? What do you want to do? That's actually what I would love to talk about. Like if anybody wants to talk about that stuff, maybe I can start a podcast or something, just talking about.
Well, there you go. This is the thing. This is the genesis of your podcast, and maybe you can use some AI tools to do it.
Yeah. How do you scale yourself? How do you do that? And how do you help other people? Because a lot of people are going to ignore this. And like every other change, people don't want it to happen. They're going to be like, this isn't real. And they're going to just like hold it like Heisman off at an angle, and stuff's going to change around them, and they're not going to be prepped for it. And they're going to feel it's going to be very unfair. They're going to be like, I trained whatever, like 8 years to be whatever my job is. And like now that job is all done by AI now, right? Like, what do I do? And there's tons of stuff to do, but people have been trained to be employees. Like, especially on America, first world, Western world stuff. You're trained to be an employee. That's the thing. You have to get out of that mindset. Like, if a bunch of stuff was easy or you're full of excuses, it's hard, I can't do it, it's not for me. You need to start like cutting those away and going like, it's going to be easy. It's going to be possible very soon, very quickly. So like, what do you want to do? Like what, you know, if you a hobby, if you paint minifigures for Warhammer 40K or something, and you really love that, double down on that because a bunch of people want their minifigures painted and they don't want to do it. So if you love doing that, then you're going to be able to like start a business doing that just based on the thought. You're going to tell your own personal assistant, like, I'm good at minifigures. Maybe I can do that for somebody. And it's going to go out as an agent, right? And like search Reddit or whatever and like find people who are like, looking for that and like send them emails and be like, hey, I can do this for you for this, whatever. And they're going to go, okay, cool. And it's going to come back with customers without you having to do anything. So like, what do you want to do? When you can work when you want, not when you don't want. You don't have to show up every day, clock in like a robot. Like, what would you do if it was sporadic, if it was inspirational? If all the grunt work could be handled. That's where we're going. So how do you leverage people?
Well, it's a good question. It's a good question. But as we come to the end of our time, you kind of touched on maybe starting a podcast talking about all this stuff yourself. So if people wanted to kind of reach out to you and connect up and maybe come and appear on that podcast when you finally get around to it, maybe when AI takes some of your day-to-day work away, where can they come and find you after this?
Yeah, thanks. So I was thinking of starting a podcast to talk about this stuff. Solo Scale AI. So Matt at Solo Scale AI, SOLO Scale AI.com is a good place to reach me. You can email there. We can chat about stuff if that's interesting.
Oh no, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people interested. Maybe I'll even come myself one day when I'm finally at the peak of my AI game. And I mean, to be fair, I do use a lot of AI tools on a daily basis, but like there's always so much more to learn, right? So I need to try and work out what the final version of myself is going to be. But one day. Well, I'll make sure to link that all into the show notes anyway, and then hopefully some people come in your direction and talk about all of this stuff in much more detail. But as for now, thanks for your hot take.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.